welcome to Fun Problems, the problems of fun. I'm Peter C. Hayward.
I'm AJ Branton.
And today, I'm the problem and AJ's the fun. Just to mix it up a little bit, kind of the opposite of normal. AJ,
Exactly.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I had a really, I had a really good day yesterday. It was with you, AJ. I had a really good day with you yesterday, so that has left me in a good mood all day.
That doesn't sound right. That does not sound right.
Well, yes, yesterday you were the fun and I was the problem. So, whatever the opposite of what I just said is. We have a little bit of follow-up. So we recorded, we haven't released yet, but we recorded the regret-isode, and as you can imagine, as soon as we finished, I was like, oh, I know more regrets. And there's one that I might have even told on the podcast before, but it was like such a seminal moment. When I first started Jelly Bean, so this is just regret-isode epilogue. Oh, by the way, there is infinite construction happening, so if you hear like hammering and stuff like that, there is nothing I can do about it. It is my life. It woke me up absurdly early. They're doing the roof, so every now and again I'll glance out the window and something will just fall past, and I'm like, oh right, that's what they're doing. So when I first started Jelly Bean, when I was young and fresh and rosy cheeked, I realized pretty quickly that I was not cut out to run a business. I continued to run a business for a very long time, as we discussed last time. But early on, I was like, maybe I can sell this business. And I had like two kind of Kickstarter successes back in 2016. Shuttle did 90k and Dracula's Feast did 90k, which for 2016 were very good numbers. Nowadays, it'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. But at the time, they were kind of bigger deals because I lost money on them. But no one knew that. So I was like, okay, I'm sick of this. I'm going to try and sell the business. And I got some of the worst business advice I've ever heard in my life, which was that if you are trying to sell a company, you take the revenue and you base it on that, not the profit, not the like anything like that, the actual revenue. So I had some, in retrospect, just like full body cringe meetings. And I'm happy to say the name because they were completely professional, perfectly lovely. Like they dealt with it appropriately. But I went over to Jamie Stegmaier's house and offered to sell him my business. And he was like, oh, maybe, like, we don't have a party line. Maybe that's the thing to do. And then I gave him the number, which from memory, and I don't have a good head for numbers, was like $250,000. And he was like, no. He sent me, I could pull it up. He sent me a very nice email being like, hey, we've thought about it and this doesn't really make sense for us. At the time, I don't think Stonemaier was worth $250,000. Trying to sell Jelly Bean with his dinky 2 hits makes zero sense. This is pre-Scythe. This is pre-Wingspan. Like, it just makes absolutely no sense. And then somehow more cringy than that is the time I was at a convention and I jumped in a I jumped in an elevator and I noticed that Scott Gator was there, who is the owner of Renegade, and he co-founded Cryptozoic. And first thing I ever said to Scott Gator was like, hey, do you want to buy my business? This is not how you do it. This is like all the cringe stories you hear about, like screenwriters jumping in an elevator and being pitched a movie, and they're like, "What are you doing?" Scott was like, "Hi, no, thank you, good luck." So they were fully professional. I was just like desperate to get out of running a business, which I still haven't managed to do 10 years later. I don't run the business part anymore. I just do the fun part. But like, oh, the regret-isode. Oh, the regret-isode. AJ, any lessons people can learn from this?
Peter's enthusiasm and confidence can be a downside.
Oh yes.
Even though I think in many ways that those are characteristics of you that I think are worth aspiring to, or even faking it till you make it. I think that there is a level-headedness, or at least a sort of
social
sense
awareness.
Of that would be useful for that.
I will say, since then, I've met with both of them. I pitched with them. They're not like holding it against me. I'm not blackbarred from anything like that. But, whew, boy, howdy. Any follow up from your end? A to the J.
Nope. Let's dive back into the best game design advice on the internet, part 7000.
Yes, so in case you've not listened, I don't know why you're starting at part 7. Daniel Piechnik is the designer of Radlands, and another upcoming game that I know nothing about besides it's being designed by him. And he wrote a manifesto, a guide to being a designer, and it's incredible. Like, I reread it a few months ago and I was like, this is so good. And so we're just literally going through like his very concise, well-written, compact text and blowing it up into a series of 20, 50 hours of podcast. Let's just dive in. So I don't know why I didn't do it a second time. I don't have headers or anything like that, so I just have the notes raw. This one, and because I did do a reread, that some of these might be repeats, but I couldn't remember repeating them. These steps, as in the changes of the round structure, are necessary. A good designer abolishes them and then finds other ways to make the game work. To me, this is like the headline of Daniel.games. Like this is what it's about. Stop making excuses for how clunky your game is. Stop being like, well, it needs to do this for this to work. And I think I've said this before, this 1,000% applies to screenwriting as well. Stop telling me like, well, the character needs to do this ridiculous thing so the plot can work. You wrote the plot. You can write it so that it doesn't need to be clunky and awful and unintuitive. I think this is in his part about like, don't have your turn have 6 phases. Now, I am honestly sometimes guilty of this. I have an upcoming game, Mighty Than the Sword, that has more turn phases than it needs to, and Providence, my big heavy Euro, has like 9 phases to a round, like Feast for Odin, which was a big inspiration for me. So if I was designing those games again today, I would work out how to not require that. my new big heavy Euro, it has 2 steps. That's it. Like it's so much cleaner.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I feel more strongly about than anything. And I think he says it in a more general way, either earlier or later. It's all a blur to me too now. But it's basically the excuse of a new designer of saying, but it has to be this way because, and no,
and
no,
that can
it
be
does
thematic.
not.
That can be like, in real life, that's how it works. I don't care. Every game is an abstraction. Abstract the clunky parts, keep the cool, clean parts.
Yes. I'm sorry I'm showing out my friend negatively here, but I've got a friend who is publishing a boxing game, and they were like, yeah, so the game could be anywhere from 2 minutes to 2 hours, because that's how long a real boxing round can go. And I might be a little bit wrong on the exact literal numbers there, but you might be right. That might be how that goes. But how many people are going to buy a product and sit down to play a game where you set it up for, I don't know, even let's say it's just a few minutes of setup, but then you played it and after 2 minutes you're like, cool, the game's over now. Do we want to play it again knowing there'll be another 2 to 90 minutes? And also people plan their gaming session around how long a game is going to take. If a game has that wide of a stretch, it's just way too much. And even if it's like, well, there's a 99% chance the 2-minute one it's not going to be 2 minutes. Cool, make it 100%. I don't think anyone's gonna play and be like, oh man, if only the game could have ended instantly, then it would have really felt like boxing. But I think that this applies even more broadly as well. Like that's just the zeroing in on the thematic example, like you were saying. But I even see this when I'm playing games with my gamer friends who aren't designers, and I'll say, this is an issue in the game because it slows down the game, it makes it more confusing, makes it harder to remember, that sort of thing. And someone will say, well, yeah, but they put it in because of this. I'm like, I understand. I know what they were trying to solve by putting this extra clunky bit in. The problem is they didn't find a better way of doing it. And it's not like I'm perfect, guys. Like I also have imperfect designs, that have clunky Band-Aid solutions here and there. But I have also rebuilt games from scratch in order to solve minor problems, like it has an extra phase, or this the turns are a little bit too long, or it's a little confusing. These are things that are really worth putting time and effort into because it has big payoffs. And the better your game does, the more you'll thank yourself for putting in that time to polish it.
I feel like we may have touched on this topic before, and I'm very happy to touch on it again because this is one of those things that needs to be drilled. Like, you need to understand this. This is definitely from his part about turn structure, because the next note I have is, there's a simple test here, and AJ, this directly applies to a thing that we've done in the last few months. There's a simple test here for you and your playtesters. Are there parts of the turn that you keep forgetting, don't actually care about, or are a drag? If so, your turn structure is wrong. I'm thinking of the locusts. I don't know if that's what sprung to mind for you.
Do you mean the bees?
No, I mean the locusts. In our game, no.
Right.
In Blades, in Blades, there's these 4 action tiles. You activate 1 per turn, and whenever we can, we try to keyword stuff, because when you're looking at the action tiles, you care about the differences, not the similarities. So 3 of the 4 locust tiles do the same thing, which is reach into your bag, quack style, pull out stuff until you bust, and then take your actions, or until you choose to stop and then take your actions. And so we call that swarm. The other thing that you need to do every turn is have the choice between shielding your leader or generating a nymph. And then we end up being like, well, what if you're already shielding, you don't have any nymphs? So we also added in, you can jump. So now the swarm keyword was shield your leader, or jump, or generate a nymph, and then do the bag thing. So we put a lot into swarm, and I see how we got there. But the trouble was that both of us kept forgetting to do the big or thing. It was just too many steps. So what did we do, AJ?
So we split it out. So swarm is now just pull from the bag. And before you swarm, we have a separate clause of doing one of those three things. But in order to give the different options more personality, instead of saying you always have these three options, each of them had two. And one of the action tiles didn't have anything to do with swarm or that, so it was irrelevant. And so one of them was shield or jump, then swarm. And because now it's explicitly written, players don't forget it. And because each of the actions, the one that type of action that they couldn't do, the one that was missing, that was something that tile was normally good at. So if it was the one where you don't get to jump, okay, we picked the one that you would least likely need to jump on, and that's the one that only had shielding or spawn.
Yeah, it may apply. So I'm going to say this is almost a golden rule. Like, I'm going to say this is a golden rule. I'm going to be less less vague and wishy-washy. If you, the designer, keep forgetting a thing, that rule needs to be cut from the game. It needs to be. And in doing that, we found something more interesting, which is like this duality of each of the tiles having two of the three is way more interesting than each of them having three of the three. It gives each one more personality. It makes them differentiated. It worked really nicely. We're both very happy when we came up with it, and it's not been an issue since. It adds more text to the tile, which is something that I try to avoid, but it adds more text in a way that I think earns its keep very strongly. Did you say you had a bees example of this?
Yeah, it's maybe less strong of one, but it was yesterday, so it's more fresh in my mind. So there was a few things we did with the bees, but the thing in particular that I think is similar to this is we rearranged the text on the card. So we didn't actually cut text, but we made it more consistent. So we had, on some tiles, it was move the queen, then do this other action, and then you buzz. And sometimes it was buzz, and then move the queen, then this other text. And because each of the tiles had these pieces of information that on their own aren't super complicated, knowing what buzz does isn't a super complicated keyword. Moving the queen, not super complicated. The rest of the chunk of text is, but
not
because
not
we had them
but different. That's the interesting part. I wouldn't say it was complicated stuff like draw a bee or whatever. Like yeah, sure.
Yeah, but the idea was because they were all in different positions, it took more mental energy to parse what each of those was going to do and the effect of them on the board state. Like the first time I sat down to play with this new build of them, I was like, this is just so much information. If we just made it so that all of them were buzz, then move the queen, then the fancy text, then it would make it so that it's much easier for me to, at a glance, say, the top two sections of each of these three tiles is the same. Mentally, I can chunk that. I understand that. And now I can just move on to the differences and how it's going to affect.
We even discussed putting and then move the queen into buzz, but we learned our lesson. We learned it from Locust. Just split it out into its own thing.
And we had good reasons for putting them in the order that we did, but it was worth rebuilding the rest of the game around. And so that's exactly where this don't make excuses comes from. We could have said, well, it has to be that you buzz after the spawn because otherwise this house doesn't work. There we go. But if we'd made that excuse, then we wouldn't have solved the problem. And after we solved the bigger problem of it's way too much information to be able to parse, like if I as the designer am struggling to figure out what I want to do on my turn, what my options are, that's an enormous problem that dwarfs the other problems that I have to solve for figuring that out. So after we rearrange the text, then we could sit down and say, okay, now how do we fix this new problem now that we've solved the much more demanding problem?
Yeah. No, I said it before and I'll say it again. Yesterday was so good. I just had such a good day of playtesting with you. It was delightful. Okay, I got one more from this section and I'll throw over to you for a bit because my next one after this is big. I want to dive into it. This is not that one. Do not force the players to discard down to X cards each turn. That's another whole pile of complex but unimportant decisions. Please, I've talked about floating numbers before and how much I hate them. I'm bad with numbers. Regretosode hopefully taught you that, but just acknowledge that a fairly successful game designer who really, really understands games, I do not enjoy keeping numbers in my head. And when your game is like, yeah, your hand size is 5 and your actions per turn is 7 and this and that, I'm just like, give it to me tangibly. This is the thing I always say. If I have a hand size of 4, great. Put 4 trees in front of me, and now give me the option of like cutting down a tree or adding more trees. And now it's a dynamic. Like now it's a really simple, clean. We actually, we spent a lot of time on Blades recently. Yesterday we ran into an issue that like I'm solving using this method. Like you can keep one thing between rounds, but as the game goes on, that gets bigger, and now it's not just an arbitrary number. I'm okay with 1. 1 is my exception. I think I've said before, 1 is the only number. Instead, there's so many good ways to do this. My favorite that I always go back to is Catan. There is no hand limit in Catan, but when the burglar is activated, if you're above X cards, I think it's 7, like then there's a consequence. And that means you're not making that micro decision every single turn of like, oh, I've got to discard down, etc., etc. You can also do what Fabled Fruit does, which is an amazing game, by the way. I can't remember if I've talked about it before, but I really love it. Which is there's a lot of effects. It's by Friedman Freeze. It's part of his Fable series. It's got a lot of effects that are something like the player with the most cards. Cool. There's not a hand size limit, but you don't want to be the player with the most cards. That's how you do this without floating numbers, without that micro decision. I love the game San Juan, which Race for the Galaxy and San Juan are like sisters. But the more the more I get into design, the more I'm like, man, that decision of like paying for cards using other cards is a whole bunch of micro decisions. It is the game, like that's the core of the game, so I think it's okay. But I just don't think it would be designed that way today, which is weird because it's so brilliant. But I think that like it's not a tedious micro decision, but it is not the most fun micro decision in the world. Do you have thoughts on discarding down to X cards?
Oh man, I've got so many thoughts. Thing number 1 is just on the last thing you said there is the discarding cards to pay further effects. Whenever there are entwined decisions like that, where there are 2 systems coupled together and the cost of one affects something else, in this case San Juan, you can play cards for whatever they say on their face, but in order to do so you have to discard cards which you could have played for their face. Like you say, it is the game for that. I designed a quite, I think, elegant, or like fairly elegant at least, Magic-esque 2-player fast-paced dueling game. Not TCG, just a card battler game where you discard cards to pay for cards. And I found the decision of what to discard every turn really juicy. I thought it was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed that decision. But the problem is it took so much time to do that that it was literally half the game. And so I actually cut that system, even though I really liked it, even though people playing it really liked it, because I was like, well, do I want half the time spent on my card battling game deciding what cards to not get to play with? And my answer was no. But it is interesting.
I want to call back to another piece of Daniel Peachnick's advice, which is if you're making a big deck of cards such as San Juan, and you're making these kind of micro decisions, that gets a lot easier if there's a lot of repeats. I tend not to have that many repeat cards in my games. Tiny Folk Cafe, the big Euro, or the medium-sized Euro that I've been working on, that has like a lot of repeated cards in the spell deck because, frankly, there's just not that much design space. And I actually, over every draft, I cut a few, so it's kind of more and more repeats. But it means that now you can like play the game being like, okay, I'm trying to get the whatever card, I'm trying to get the coffee bean card, I'm trying to get the milk card, I'm trying to get the brew card. Like, you know that they're coming, and having a little market of 3 cards is not as complex as it is if every single card is different. This is one way if you really want that mechanism that AJ was talking about in his game. Like if you have 10 types of cards, which wouldn't work for an MCG battler, MCG TCG like MTG. Battler, then that's one way that you can reduce that decision space. And I just want to mention that because that is another excellent piece of Peachnick advice that I think applies here. Okay, back to you in the studio.
Yep, strongly agree. No, this is what the whole podcast is about. This is actionable advice on how to solve problems and improve the craft. This is what the podcast is, my friend. I'm very happy that you interrupted to say it. And thank you, Daniel Peachnick, for that excellent advice that we are co-opting. So for your Catan example, it's a great example of how you don't have an arbitrary number for the hand size, but you do have an arbitrary floating number for how many you have to have that makes you discard down past, right? Like the 7, if you have more than 7 cards, you discard half your hand. The 7 cards being the cap there is a floating number. It's a threshold,
not
I do think
not an every turn cap, yeah.
Right, so I don't see that as solving floating numbers. I see that as solving
It
as
massively
solving.
reduces the floating numbers. It comes up like once every 10 turns instead of at the end of each of your turns.
Yes, it's something that you don't have to track in your head often. And when it does come up, you're like, what's the number again? Not like, not saying like, oh, I have to every turn double check my hand size. So it's much less mental work and much less like logistical work for players, but it is still a number that you have to remember. I will say with hand sizes, something to consider is why do you have a hand size? I think many games that have hand sizes would benefit from just not having them. Like what is the point in most games? Most of the time, I think people have hand sizes because they are just like, I don't know, it's like a lot of
It's
cards.
just the done
You know,
thing.
you don't want to hold too many cards, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not really thought of
And this is another
enough
example
as
of
to
fix it
like what
elsewhere.
benefit.
If people are able to hold 40 cards in
Right.
their hand, you've made a mistake somewhere else. Don't add an arbitrary. That's the thing that gets me. It's this arbitrary cap, and for me, it screams of I couldn't be bothered designing the game. I couldn't be bothered solving the problem at its core, so instead I just added a cap. I call them rails. I think I've talked about this before. Like when you can tell when someone's game is on rails because it's like, okay, you can do this, but not too much. Don't do the fun thing too much because the game breaks if you have too much fun. And it's like, don't take down those rails. There's a designer who's, oh my gosh, I can't remember his name. I think it might be Christopher. Anyway, I met him years ago and I played his game, and I've thought about that game very often because A, it was really fun and interesting, and B, I sat down to play the game. It was all rails all the time, and every turn, it was like, don't do that. Oh, hey, just make sure you don't do that. And he had already pre-built in solutions to these problems, so they felt like they were vestigial rails. And so I gave my standard half-hour feedback. If you've ever heard me giving feedback, you'll know what I mean. But I did a thing that I really love it when designers let me do, which is like, hey, can we just play this again with some tweaks? Because I want to know as a designer if these tweaks make sense. I want that immediate feedback. So I said, hey, you've already got these systems that deal with the rails. Can we just get rid of every single rail and play again? And you know what? It 98% worked. He had built such a well-formed core that he didn't need any of the rails, but it's that designer anxiety of like, oh no, oh whoa, I don't want it to break, but he'd already fixed it at the core. And so we played it and it worked. Everyone at the table, I think, was like, oh yes, this is the experience I wanted from your description. And it required basically no changes except for cutting 25, not literally 25, but cutting chopping down those rails.
Yeah. I'll also say if you have floating numbers, one thing to make them not floating anymore is put them on the board. Make a physical thing that makes it obvious. Peter was alluding to an example earlier. Yes, exactly. If you have a player board and you have 5 spaces on the player board, and each of those spaces can hold one resource, it couldn't be more clear. You're never going to think about it as it's never going to take up brain space. It's going to be super obvious. No one's ever going to ask about whether or not it's 5 or 6.
Like if you have 5 spaces,
yes.
Great. You've now got an artifact you can buy that says 2 more spaces. It there's no rules overhead there. You've suddenly got a bunch of cool content that you can very organically add to the game.
Now, it's harder with hand size because typically those exist in the zone of your hand and not on the board, so it doesn't have a space for it in the same way. But you could consider converting those cards into tiles. You could, look at other types of components that could potentially be solving that problem, or you could have the cards live on the player board depending on what type of game you have. So, for instance, in Aquatica, you don't have a hand limit for the cards in your hand, but you do have multiple limits on the cards that you can have on your board in different zones and each of those spaces have slots. So it's not an issue for that game having a million cards in hand, but the issue would be bulking up and having 15 things in play at once. And so where they're like, okay, we have to have a rail in this game. We don't care about the hands, but we do care about having a rail on the number of cards you can acquire and those sorts of things. Cool, we'll put those on the board. So once you've played the card, it goes onto a specific zone of the board, and without you having to do any extra work, it's already in the place that is showing you that is taking up space. It's great.
I just went through my list. I have never had a hand limit in any of my 46 signed games.
Nice. That's awesome. So for floating numbers, Ones, like Peter said, totally acceptable. I think tens are by far the second most acceptable number because we live in a base 10 number system sort of world. And for hand sizes, particularly with starting hand sizes, because starting hand sizes is something that is often harder to telegraph to players. It's harder to like find space to put it somewhere on the board or whatever to tell players, especially if you don't already have a player board. But if you need to pick a number of cards in your starting hand and the number can't be 0 or can't be 1, and usually you're not going to go 10 because 10 is a lot for starting cards, then 7 is by far the most common number. So make it 7. Whenever there's a game and the starting hand size is 6, it drives me up the wall because I'm like, I'm going to forget this every time I play the game. Because almost every single game that is heavily card-based and has a starting hand size, it is 7. Magic the Gathering, Cosmic Encounter. I could, and even like the hand cap of losing half or more from Catan, it's 7. Almost every
7,
game that
yeah.
has the arbitrary hand size starting, it's 7. Try as best as you can to make it 7, 1, or 0, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. I love not having starting anything. Sometimes you need to. There's an old piece of advice of like, if the first 3 turns of a game is scripted, give players the stuff to get them to that turn 3 so they can start playing the game. And so that's why a lot of starting resources. But for many of my games, either they're asymmetrical and you're like, oh, cool, I'm playing this, so I start with this. Or you start with nothing. And I like both of those very much as solutions.
Yeah. All right. Shall I go with one of my pieces? I'm in the catch-up section. So the quote is, being in an unwinnable position sucks. You might as well not be playing the game. Catch-up mechanisms keep the game competitive by giving losing players a leg up or holding back winning players. Vert catch-up mechanics are anti-meritocratic and feel bad. In my gangster game, the showdown effect causes all opponents to lose half their health. The opponents with more health, therefore, lose more. Do you have any immediate thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, there is a schism, AJ, in the game design community. There is a strong schism, and someday I firmly believe this will turn into a civil war, which is the Quacks of Quedlingberg catch-up mechanism. I love it. It is my favorite catch-up mechanism of all time. I have implemented it in many games now. Like, I just think it's so brilliant, so clever, so cool. And this quote is anti that. Like, a lot of designers, in Mightier Than the Sword we use it, and 2 different developers have been like, oh, I hate that mechanism. And I'm like, cool, play it without it and you'll see that like you do need it. And it's one of those, in Mightier Than the Sword, it's not tied to victory points, it's tied to like a different resource. So you can strategically play around like not having that resource, but like you count the difference between you and the leader and you get that many boosts basically. Like that, I think it's so clean, so elegant, so perfect, and the opposite of what this quote is recommending. So I feel like that's a very divisive quote. And come the revolution.
So I think that similarly to most of Daniel Piechnick's advice, this is very didactic, very this is the way things are, and
black and white. That's
yes,
what I'm trying to say.
I black and white, absolutely. I will say, I think that every single player would agree that a non-heavy-handed, non-overt catch-up mechanic is better than an overt and heavy-handed catch-up mechanic. I don't think that's a super controversial thing to say, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think if you want to try and have your cake and eat it too, then you want to sort of look at the systems in your game, like he was saying right there, right? With the if you have a card that makes everyone lose half their health, that disproportionately affects the people who have the most health. So assuming we're not in blue shell territory where your health is actually a measure of how close you are to winning, and it's not like, well, there's your health pool, but then there's your mana, and then the cards in hand, and then the board state, like in Magic the Gathering, where it's like, oh, I've got 50 million different resources that aren't health that matter more. Cool. But in the assumption that is a very significant measure of who's doing well, and effects that scale off of how well a player is doing, great. There's also effects in the game that are, or in game design that are more subtle. Some of my favorites are things like in Blood Rage, which I know I've said before, but I'll say it again. When you get into a combat in Blood Rage, the winner loses the card that they used to win the battle. The loser keeps it. So the winner, they got good XP, they got victory points. Great. And it's so elegant, right? Because you have to do something with your cards anyway. And if you lost, I tried to use my really good card and I lost, I lose my card. That would feel awful. But saying, no, you get to keep it. And they use their really powerful card to win that battle. Cool, it's gone. That it did cost them something. Great, brilliant, love it.
And again, just like the example of like adding a new dial, it allows you to, as they did in Blood Rage, build a faction based around losing. The Loki, like whatever it is, the Loki suit of cards, like they want to lose, and so they can keep on. It just opens up really interesting, clever design space. In a different game I've got with the designer of Mighty Than the Sword, we had and the thing is that I prize, I value, I care so deeply about just like it implements straight away. So we have a system where if you need to have the same number of cards in hand. So if you have a battle, it's you play a card to move, and then you play a different card from hand to have the battle. But if you and I were battling and someone else wasn't, then we'd have fewer cards. We can't have that. So at the end of the battle, you just draw from either the winner deck or the loser deck, and the winner deck has low numbers and the loser deck has high numbers. It's a very overt catch-up mechanism, but I think it's clean and simple and like fixes the problem with zero rules overhead, and means that you can be like, oh, I'm actually going to play a really low number to lose this battle because I think he's going to go all in. So I'm essentially trading one of my low numbers for a high number. I really like it. I'm very proud of that system. But like, it's just an example of like where adding a clean system that has a few. I got to stop using the word hooks. Like adds a few. What are they called in APIs where you can like connect to other things? I'll call them connectors. It adds a few connectors. So now it's like, it's a very simple catch-up mechanism. And it's now part of the strategy. It's part of the game. I love that. That's my dream. That's what I love. So even though it is a little overt, we did a whole episode on catch-up mechanisms. I don't know why I'm diving into it now.
Yeah. Just a few quick moments since we're on the topic. In Sakura Arms, when you take damage, your lost HP becomes mana. So you can use that for special abilities called Flare in the game if we're being pedantic, but for the common person. And Flamme Rouge has a really nice one where you can draft and move extra spaces if you are behind somebody. If you're directly behind someone, you get to move up an extra space, basically. And so if you're in first, definitionally, you do not have access to that mechanic. But you could argue it's not really a catch-up mechanic because it's a core built-in part of the game to maximize how many extra spaces you can move off of that one before knowing when to pull ahead from the pack. And there's the mind games of trying to be just behind someone to keep taking advantage of those sorts of things. I think the less it feels to players like it is a catch-up mechanic, even when it is, the better it's going to be, particularly because there are those people out there who have just such an averse reaction to it. But I think, too, if you have it's also not just how blatant it is, how obvious that it is as a catch-up mechanic, but it's also the severity of it. I know Power Grid is very famous for having the game is the catch-up mechanic. I haven't played it, but that is what I've heard from many different people. And it makes it feel like, well, what's the point of trying to win when actually trying to lose the first round, gives you a bigger advantage. And I think games like Isle of Skye and Heat, I think they are way too far in the catch-up mechanism side of things. I get that you don't want someone feeling that they can't win partway. I think it's so ridiculous. Sorry, which one were we talking about? Was it the surprise about Heat or Isle of Skye?
Heat, yeah. I've only played Heat the once, and it was like 11 p.m., but I remember being very impressed with it.
I think it is way too extreme. I've played without it, with people who are competent gamers, and they were always close, good, fun games. When we play it with the catch-up is so extreme, it makes it feel like there's no point in using any resources at all in the first half of the race, because if I just go slow intentionally and just keep getting value off of the catch-up mechanic, I just win. And I've seen people who it's like at the end of the first race, they made terrible decision after terrible decision after terrible decision, and they won because that's how intense the catch-up mechanic is. And you might say, oh, that's great, they had a chance of winning. But I don't feel like the person who played the worst should have won. And I don't want to get into a giant comment war about whether or not it's correct to actually play into the catch-up mechanic. But all I'm saying is that's how it feels. It feels that extreme.
As with every game, obviously you need to factor in the context of who are they targeting. Like, if you're targeting heavy Euro players, yeah, absolutely don't do that. If you're playing kids, 10,000% do that. And so it's just a big factor in this decision is like, where is your market?
And I mean, he's extremely successful. It's probably in significant part extremely successful because when people play poorly, they still get a very good chance of winning the game. So, there is an absolutely good reason to be doing that, even if it's something that I personally hate. That's it for catch-up mechanisms. I think. No, I wrote down a couple other things you could do. Oh no, so this is a quote from him about catch-up mechanisms. So this is escalating point values. Too much of this invalidates early rounds, but obviously, like if in round 2 there's twice as many points available to score as round 1, then round 1 still matters. It still has impact on it, but they still feel like they have a chance. Politics, this is where it's like, oh, don't attack me, attack Peter. Peter's got more points. And Peter's like, I have more points, but he's got the better board. And then we poke each other for 5 minutes, and then they decide to king make.
Yeah, you don't like that?
Obscuring, this is one of my favorite. It varies. So to me, it's not politics in and of itself. To me, it's how does the game itself encourage and handle and enable politics. So if it's there's a toy game that I think it was Richard Garfield came up with, or at least him and his co-authors, and the characteristics of games, which is called the balloon game. It's like, I have 3 balloons, you have 3 balloons, and Sally over there has 3 balloons. Each turn, choose someone's balloon to pop. So the game is effectively, I have to convince you to pop Sally's balloon and not mine. And if we can do that, cool, then Sally's out. And then it's just a 1v1. But like, I do not find that level of politics at that like core level to be engaging whatsoever. I think politics with more layers to it, where there's more than just like, let's pick who loses, like vote who lose games, just doesn't.
What about something like Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones, I don't think it has enough. It's been a while since I played it. It's been years, but if I recall correctly, it doesn't have enough stuff to to like give to someone to entice them to do the right thing. Like what I want in a politics game is not me just sitting there having to convince you about the right move being to not attack me. I want it to be like, listen, if you help me over here, or if you don't attack me over here, I can help you in some other way. To me, this is purely personal taste. I enjoy that much more because the game is giving me ways of interacting besides just, Peter doesn't like the way I look today, so he's gonna, beat me. Or, oh, that's my wife sitting over there. I want her to have a good time, so I'm not going to attack her. You know what I mean? I think Twilight Imperium is.
This is the thing I say a lot. The Twilight Imperium trade goods is really good. The quote that I often say when I'm playing games and will continue to say is every game is a politics game when I'm playing, because I can win A, because I'm good at games, but B, because I can suggest good moves for other players that advantage me. Like, it's still a good move for them, but it absolutely like helps me if they do that. And so like in any game where there is like a central board or anything like that, I can that is a politics game to me.
Any game with targeted player interaction is a politics game. I think it's safe to say, and that's something that.
Oh no, for me, it's like if I want someone to leave a spot clear, I will convince them to go to another spot, knowing it hurts another player and leaves a spot clear for me. Like, it doesn't. That's what I'm saying. Like, every game is a politics game, short of something like Can't Stop, where there's literally no interaction.
Right, makes sense. A couple other suggestions from Daniel Games. This is my favorite one: obscuring. I love obscuring points. If you don't know exactly how many points someone has, then you don't know how badly you're losing until the end of the game. It's great because it means that for the people who really hate catch-up mechanisms, they don't have the feel bad of, oh, I lost to a catch-up mechanism. For players who are bad, yeah, at the end of the game, it sucks to be like, oh, yeah, you have 1 million more points to me. That is a negative of obscuring points. That at the end, it doesn't look as close as it would if you had a catch-up mechanism. But it does still mean that you feel like you're in it for the whole game. And then at the end of the game, you might be like, oh, how did you get so many points? But for most of the game, you're having a good time.
My games almost never use obscuring because I don't make victory point games. Like, the few victory points I have in games like Critter Kitchen, etc., are on a public space. Like, I don't. Critter Kitchen has like hidden stuff behind the board that then you reveal at the end and score. But for the most part, like, I don't make victory point games, and when I do, the victory points are very public. So it's not that I see obscuring points as a cheat. I think it's vital. I recommend it a lot of time for players, but like, it just doesn't apply to the way that my games work. And so I need to, we'll do a great episode on victory points someday. Stay tuned. But I need to like dive deeper and deeper and deeper into ways of obscuring victory without just being like, and your points are hidden.
Right. Things like hidden player goals, those sorts of things, or this type of card, you know how much it's normally worth, but it's worth extra more to you. Those sorts of things. I think those are all great. And like Peter says, they don't apply to every game, but I think they apply to the vast majority of you listening, especially like in comparison to how much it applies to Peter. Like, Peter's not a normal person, in case you couldn't tell from the blue beard. uh, and the last note that Daniel gives for ending or for avoiding catch-up mechanisms is simply ending the game sooner. Love it. Yes, please have shorter games, people. I do not want to sit there for hours and hours and hours knowing that I have lost the game, or hours and hours in general. Usually, most games outstay their welcome. I swear to you, no matter what game you're working on, try just reducing the points you need by 10%, reduce the life points by 10%, reduce the number of rounds by 10%, and just see what happens. My guess is you won't miss the extra 10% of time that you would have spent, and you will be very happy that the game is now more condensed and faster.
Yeah, it has a knock-on effect. It's like you were saying earlier of like you make the change early and you will see it reap benefits again and again and again. It'll make your play testing faster. It'll make the development process faster. It'll make more people play your game. It really just like continues to be a benefit. Blades is interesting because I think that's the only game I've worked on where the publisher came back and said, "Hey, this game is too short," and we were like, "It is too short," and we had to like. Fortunately, actually, I don't know if I've told the story. AJ had suggested a thing like 3 months earlier, and I'd been like, look, I don't want to rewrite the game that much. Let's just put that on the shelf. And then when the publisher was like, it's too short, I was like, AJ made a gift. Here is a gift from AJ that completely solved the problem and like just immediately worked. It was great.
It was a happy coincidence, let's call it, because I didn't have a huge problem with like how long the game was either. But I think that it was absolutely the right call to make it a bit longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, with I forget what I was going to say. That's probably fine. I think I said most of what I wanted to say about that.
Knock-on effects. Okay, cool. Okay, we'll probably finish on this one.
Let's move on. You got any big ones?
Yes, there's no point adding anything else to your game or proceeding until you have a good core. Do not go off and work on other parts of the game. No amount of good ideas, work, arts, and other things matter if the core doesn't work. I call this clarity. The more your game is about its central challenge, the more clarity it has. Give the players a distilled experience of one simple concept. This is like I've probably said this 5 times now. If you take one thing from this blog, this is it. This is the whole core of my ethos of game design. I think I've talked about the seeds metaphor before, where like your game core should be a seed, and everything else should grow from that seed. You should be able to point to every single branch, every single leaf, every single part of your game, every rule, every mechanic, every thematic decision, and trace it down the branch, down the trunk, under the ground, to the seed that started your game. And if you're a better game designer than I, which many people are, you can have 2 seeds and they grow a pair of intertwined plants. I always think of Great Western Trail, which is simultaneously like the core is the rondelle and the deck builder. And they are planted in unison, and every single choice in that game grows out of the unification of those 2 things. The thing that drives me the most as a playtester, as a developer, as everything like that, is where I'm like, why is this in the game? And it's like I've pointed to a random shrub 2 feet along, and they're like, oh, it's cool. And I'm like, cool, but how does this tie back to your core? And often this, like, again, this is the way that I think. This is obviously the way Daniel Peachnik thinks. This is game design to me. And more than that, it is screenwriting. It is fiction writing. It is YouTube. Like, you need to have a central core premise, and then everything comes out of that. And the movies and TV shows that drive me nuts are the ones that don't do that, and they're just not for me. Don't add 15 mechanisms until you can vocalize what your core is and how they bring that mechanism in. I also think of it as tension. With Blades, the core is I take an action, you take an action. Then you take an action, I take the paired action. Every other decision we've made grows from that. And that's a weird one because there's all these kind of sub-trees. But every one of those sub-trees, the butterflies, the bees, the locusts, they all have their own core. I mean, I could run through them. The butterfly it's an engine builder where your engine is based on your defenseless unit surviving. Every choice comes from that. Like, and there's multiple ways you can do that, but I can still trace every single decision back to those 2 cores in the case of Blades. Every one of my games, everything I come up with. This is why I'm making more and more party and very light games at the moment, because I get to come up with a core that I really like and then just make decisions to water and fertilize and grow that core. and everything else is unnecessary. And I get a lot of compliments, he said modestly, of how simple the scoring systems are in my game, or how simple the like incentives are, and it's because of that. Like this is, I warned you, this is a big one for me. Like this is the core of my game design and all creative philosophy. I don't know why I didn't pull this the first time I read through. The second time through, I was like, oh, it's the thing. It's the thing that I feel. Maybe it wasn't in the earlier draft. But like party games, I'm really enjoying making at the moment because I get to be like, oh, here's a weird way to think. Great. Now I spend, a month coaxing that into life, and suddenly I've got a flower, and I can pluck that flower and sell it to a publisher. But it's because like I've recognized a core, and I've grown this core, and I've facilitated this core, and really, really importantly, I have trimmed everything that does not directly stem from that core. That's my diatribe. This is possibly my favorite quote on the site.
So I think I'm going to zero in on the Blades example, and I want to zoom out in a minute here. So for the Blades one, I agree that the central action selection is like the thing that ties the room together, in that I choose a thing and then you get the thing back from it. That everything does build off of that core engine there. But I would say that the second element of it is the asymmetry, where clearly each of the factions are asymmetric.
The asymmetry to me is just coming from that core. So I pick a thing, you pick a thing. Cool. How do we make that core concept as interesting as possible? Asymmetry. That is still like a direct offshoot of the core. Now, like I said, that offshoot has then produced a bunch of different stuff. But my point is that you can trace everything back to the seed. Everything. It all comes back to that core.
Gotcha.
I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but I'm saying like it's not just randomly we went like, hey, you know what we both like? We like trading. So let's do this base and also do trading. Is the question that we asked very early on is trading the best way to implement this? It comes from it. It's not a separate second thing.
Right. I think for like more complex games too, oftentimes you can trace things to the same seed. I think I struggle with this because, again, this is something where like my tastes as a player and my tastes as a designer, the aesthetics that appeal to me, that I want to work with, that I want to be in, are exactly that. And I find it very frustrating when we agree so heavily, because I worry that this isn't one of those cases, like you said, it's not one of those things where this is every designer should do this, right? Necessarily. But it seems like it's always the right thing, doesn't it? Because I feel like even if you look at bigger, heavier, more complex games, most of those ones have that core seed build off of them and are very elegant for the weight class that they're in a lot of ways. And I find that when games aren't focused like that, I find that they run into a lot of problems. But I struggle with this because I wonder, is this just my taste and your taste? Is there something to be said for games that look to me like a chaotic soup,
Yeah, there is no such thing as a single right answer when it comes to art, obviously, and you're not saying that there is. I would say that I think that this is pretty broadly true of every successful product. Now, there are going to be weird exceptions. There's weird exceptions for everything. I would say that the taste difference mostly comes from the starting core. For me, it's mechanical tension. Everything I make is based off mechanical tension. Again, to go back to Blades, I want to do this thing, but if I do, that'll give you that thing, which I don't want you to do. I don't really want to do this thing, but I do want you to do that thing. Like, that is a core tension, and core mechanical tension is always my seeds. I have a game, Bees, Butterflies, and Birds, Bees, and Butterflies, where the card is split in half, and every turn you draw a card, and I either give you half and I keep the other half, or I flip it 180. That's the decision space, and it's actually quite similar to the Blades example, but like it's that thing of like, oh, I want this, but I don't want to have that. I'll use a co-op example. French toast. I want to convey information to you, but I can't speak. All I can do is say whether it's closer or further to other things. Like there is a core tension there that all I did, like that came to me as a gift. Like that's an existing core tension, and then the development process was me watering and growing and watering and growing. And being like, okay, where do people struggle? Cool, let's add a thing in to help them if people just aren't getting it. Let's curate the list. Let's do this kind of stuff. But that core tension of, AJ, I want to tell you the word toaster, but I'm not allowed to say anything except for what you say. That's such a fascinating core tension to me. I could go into heavy games, etc. So I haven't played it, and I know a lot of people love it. Obsession sounds like a game I will not enjoy. Um, it just doesn't feel like it's made for me, which is fine. Most games are not made for me. But I suspect, without ever having played it, that he started from the theme. He wanted to tell the Downton Abbey kind of, social thing, and everything comes from that seed of theme. So from my perspective, as someone who likes mechanical tension, I haven't played it, don't at me. I suspect that the mechanics will not be to my taste. A friend of mine did some development on it. He was like, man, there are some weird decisions because we are mechanics first. If you are theme first, that's a completely valid seed. And like you were saying, the mechanics might be a mess, but if you can trace every one of those mechanics to implementation of a seed, I think it's still following the same broad philosophy while being for wildly different tastes. Does that make sense?
Yep, yeah, I hear you. I would be very curious just to hear from a designer who only does heavy games that have a lot of different things going on that feel less focused, and see if they agree with that, or if their big, crazy, weird, heavy games came from that same sort of place, or if they designed them in a different way, if they built them up like block by block, modular piece by modular piece. I'd be very curious to
process of creation. I'm not saying you should start with. I'm not saying you have to start with seed. That's how I do it. But like at some point in the process, you should start. So with writing, I'm better equipped to talk about this with writing. I need to write like 3 drafts of a thing before I work out what the theme is. Then, once I've found the theme, I go back and retool it all with that in mind. Mechanically, that could be the exact same thing. Like you can bring a game out that has like these 7 different things that don't relate, and then after you've played it 10 times, be like, oh, here's what it is, and then do the pruning process later. It's a different approach, but I think, and maybe I'm just trying to fit a square peg into a round hole here, I think it falls under that same broad seed philosophy.
Gotcha. I remembered what I was going to say earlier. Do you want to talk more on this, though? I know that this is your big manifesto.
No, you keep starting a thought and then I interrupt you. So please start your next thought, and I promise not to interrupt you.
Deal. So this was a suggestion, just going back to the length of games and everything, and how I was saying, if you just reduce the length of your game by 10%, it'll probably just be a better game. I think a lot of newer designers in particular end up just being like, hey, I'm just going to make this game, and how long is it? I don't know, 10 rounds. We'll just play 10 rounds. And it doesn't there isn't as much thought put into how long the game should be. And I would suggest trying to start with how long you want the game to be, and then make it that long. So if you're making generally speaking, a light Euro, cool, aim for 30 minutes. If it is, and at the 30-minute mark, you're done. Just stop playing the game and say, all right, we only got through 2 rounds of my light Euro, in giant air quotes, in 30 minutes. That is way, way, way too long per round. So how do I make the rounds faster? Or if you get to the end of 30 minutes and you're like, wow, we played through 30 rounds, that seems like a lot. How is every round 1 minute long? I don't usually find people's games play too quickly. That hasn't usually been a problem that I've seen. I would say just start with knowing, what the weight class of game you're in, and try to sculpt your game around being that long, especially early on in the process when you've got more control. Because if you just start with, I don't know, it's going to play about 10 rounds or whatever, and it takes 10 rounds to get the number of VP I wanted or whatever, or in order for the tech tree to evolve properly. Cool, just speed things up. Give players resources faster. Do whatever you need to do. Make it take as long as players are going to expect it's going to take when they pick up the box on the shelf. You don't want someone picking up a game off the shelf that looks like it's going to be 30 to 45 minutes and it says an hour and a half on it. It's too much.
AJ's advice is don't lie to your customers.
Well, it depends. If you lie to them, are they going to buy it?
Agree. The one thing I'll push back a little bit on there is, and this doesn't work for me. Of like, I want this game to be 30 minutes, so I will make it 30 minutes. It's my dog on a leash metaphor, which is, if you want to take your dog for a walk and you just want to go as far as possible, picking a direction and forcing the dog to that direction will go less far than just being like, where do you want to go, dog? Let's go, and following it that way. So, it's weird because rounds and time are very different. So Alex and I have a game that we wanted to be 3 rounds, and we played it, and every playtester was like, after 1 round, they're like, cool, this feels like the ending point for the game. Now, I don't think we've even timed it. We're just trying to get the core to work. But had I gone in being like, no, we want it to be 30 minutes, I think that would have been a mistake, And so instead we're just like, okay, well, now it's got to be a 1-round game. How do we rejig everything to make that work? I've definitely played prototypes where I'm like, this length feels wrong. I feel like I only just got started, or I feel like it went too long. Like you said, it's mostly that it went too long. But I think and it's a taste thing, but like see what the game wants to be and what your playtesters want it to be, and target that. Is my personal stance on that. But I don't think that negates your advice. I think just being like, I want to make 30 minutes, stop at 30 minutes is a really useful exercise. But then always, always playtest your game and listen to feedback of like, that felt too long, that felt too short. I have definitely had that felt too short feedback before. Oh, like Blades we were talking about. And sometimes games just do. Sometimes you're like, I want to get my teeth into this a little bit more. Go ahead.
I will also say there's something to be said for understanding when the dog's going somewhere and your choice is force the dog to go somewhere it doesn't want to, which isn't going to work out super well for you, or follow the dog into a place that you do not want to go into, and it's not worth it to do that either. And knowing that you, rather than killing a darling and having to like turn your heavy euro into a light euro when you do not want to make a heavy euro or a light euro, and you're like, I understand this mechanism is much better suited for a light euro, and it's not working this heavy euro. You can rebuild a new heavy euro using that same mechanism. You could, but what I'm saying is you don't have to say, all right, I'm going to follow the dog. I'm going to make this light euro that I don't want to make, because as we've said before, if you are working on a game that you yourself do not like, then you're going to have a very miserable time designing that game. And you're going to have to play it a lot in order to get from start to finish here. So I've actually had it before where I was designing a game and, I realized that the correct decision for this game was to turn it into something I don't want to play. And so rather than following the dog or forcing the dog, I just shelved it. I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to make this game. And that's fine. I can spend my time doing other things.
Shot the dog.
But I just want to point that out as an option. Yeah, I shot the dog. Jeez.
Yeah, I think you are correct, and I think I disagree. Like, I think if you love a mechanism and it wants to be a light euro, you'll probably like that light euro. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I don't like co-op games, and I've ended up making a lot of co-op games because that's what the game wanted to be, and because I like the system of how we got there. I've got games on my shelf that are not exactly my kind of game, but I can love and appreciate them for what they are, and trust that the publisher is like, hey, look, we do love cooperative games, and so we know the right decisions to make. I think you're probably more correct, but that's my that's my counterpoint that I don't fully stand behind.
I hear what you're saying. I just think that that's going to be most people's default, is to try to make it work in the other one. So I just wanted to say, like, it's okay to quit, it's okay to let go, because I think most people's default is, I'm not a quitter, or giving up on something feels bad. And I am a huge proponent of quitting. I quit things all the time. And I just want to
quitting this podcast.
Make sure that people are aware that there's other games that they could make, and not spend their time doing something that's going to make them miserable.
AJ, would you like to have some problems?
I would. Do you want to give me a publisher tip for today?
Oh. I came up with a publisher tip as we were talking. I had a different one prepped, but it is very, very, very useful from a publisher designer perspective to understand the core fun of your game. Because in my various games published, I have been assigned developers who, for one reason or another, just didn't get what the core was. And so their suggestions don't make sense if you don't understand the core of the game. So being able to articulate, well, I didn't just make this decision because it worked because it was fun. Like, yes, it worked and it was fun, but because it does emphasize this part of the core was really helpful for the relationship with developers to be like, oh, I see. I've had probably 2 or 3 over the years who would look at the mechanisms and were very good at understanding the mechanisms, but hadn't gone deeper than that. So they were able to balance every card so it was perfectly balanced. But when we came to a structural problem, their default was like, oh, well, let's just swap it out for this mechanism. And I could articulate that doesn't work. Not that it doesn't work, but that doesn't lead into the core. The reason we did it this way is this. And by being able to articulate, by understanding the core of my game, they will be like, oh, right, okay. And suggest something that worked even better because it understood the core of the game. Being able to articulate, super valuable.
Yep, I like that. And I think, I mentioned before that I start with a vision document, and it's very, very simple, very, very bare bones, but just being able to write out why is this exciting? What is the thing that was the core of this game? What we were talking about before was the seed, that kind of thing. That helps, I think, not only ground you during your design, but as Peter's saying, also when it gets handed off to the publisher, making sure that it's crystal clear, this is why you should sign the game, and then to a developer, what do you need to keep in the game? Because I mean, of course, it'd be nice if they checked in and had those conversations with you, but that doesn't always happen. And being able to say, hey, here's the game, and also here's like my thoughts going ahead in case we don't connect. I think could be super
fun, laggy fun.
Laggy fun. What is the YouTube video you have rewatched the most?
Okay, I got two answers to this. I got a short one and a long one. So the short one, it's funny. I think I put this question in the doc like 6 months ago, and I rewatched my short one today. Is the pitch meeting for Cats. I just love it. I think it's the best pitch meeting. I go back to it regularly. Pitch meeting is my favorite YouTube series. It's by Ryan George, and every one of them is a little goldmine. But the Cats one, it just works so well. I think because Cats is so insane. And it's more than just like the Cinema Sins kind of like, we're making fun of a thing. Like, he writes clever, fun, interesting jokes and weaves them into his like, it's so good. If you haven't checked out Pitch Meeting, do it. And Cats is a really good one to start with. The long one is a weird one. There's a YouTuber called Paul Dugan, Pawdugan. And in like 2010 or like 2015, something like that, he made a Let's Play of King's Quest V. I swear I've watched it like a dozen times. It's like 5 to 10 hours long, and it's just my comfort viewing. It's just what I watch. Like, I watch a lot of YouTube, but I won't revisit stuff that often. Like, once I've seen it, I've seen it. Bright by Lindsay Ellis and Paul Dugan's Let's Play King's Quest V series. I've watched both of those a dozen times. I got to meet them both in New York, and so that was very delightful. But it's my comfort viewing. I just love it. I love King's Quest. I love Paul Dugan's commentary. It's more than a normal Let's Play. He like does little animations and background stuff and edits it, and like it's got like 18,000 views, and I'm like, but it's such a seminal piece of work in the English canon. It's not. I just love it so much. So many of those 18,000 views are just me. How about you, AJ?
For my long one, I'm sure this is wrong, but I can't think of one that I have watched more off the top of my head. So the one that I can remember watching the most is a video on how to design single player levels to guide players through them, which is a topic I'm absolutely obsessed with. If I wasn't a board game designer, I would love to do exactly that job. I think it's so fascinating how to like subtly direct players' attention one way or the other, how to make them like go to a dead end and then like realize that turn around, it changes like their perspective on things, have them completely ignore a path that's right beside them that you don't want them to see right away and then see it later. And there's one particular video that I'll put in the show notes. It just does such an incredible job of going through so many examples. It goes through like what you would normally go through for a whole level, like I think a 30 or 45 minute level. And he's just playing it like a walking simulator, right? He's just literally walking through the level. There's no enemies. There's nothing to interact with, no puzzles. It's just the architecture of the level and how it forces players through certain paths or guides them into paths and makes them feel certain ways when they go into some spaces, feel other ways when they go into others, and help them understand
Do you know what
the space.
Very popular game is shockingly bad at that? Halo 1. I was a Halo 1 kid, and if you played Halo 1, you'll know you just spend like hours being like, did I miss a path? Like, oh, I'm in a new area. Nope, this is where I started. Like, you'll spend 20 minutes backtracking. It's like just horrendously designed, Halo 1. I think they fixed it for the sequels, but I have so many memories of, especially the level where you land on the planet, like driving out again and being like, oh, this is where I came in. I've not advanced. I have somehow backtracked for like 20 minutes, and so I guess I'm going again.
And the games, this is like what we were saying before of like, there's the bad way to do it, right? Where you have, you have yellow paint on every single handheld grip you have, or you have a giant icon and you just like follow the giant floating icon as you drive through. Well, it's like, cool. I don't feel like I'm exploring. I don't feel immersed in the world. This sucks. But then when you play a game where it's like, go anywhere you want, you have no idea what to do. And you're like, whoa, really? But the designers were very careful in guiding you through that space in non-obvious ways. Oh, so satisfying. So satisfying.
Yeah, 100%.
My short one is Attack on Titan is my favorite anime. And when the first season came out, the opening song of that, I was like, wow, this is one of the best songs I've ever heard. I thought it was awesome. And then there was a season later in line. I was like, wow, this song is even better, I think. I was like, this is incredible. And then when the final season was dropping, I was like, okay, I know it's unreasonable, but all I want is a song that's as good as that. And it was also amazing. And so when the third one came out, I listened to that one on loop for probably like 8 hours a day for like weeks, just as like a thing to have in the background as I'm doing work, which normally I throw on like a podcast or something, but I just like the song so much and I needed to like concentrate more. So I just threw that one on forever and ever. So that's definitely a lot of
This has
hours
probably
listening to that
prompted
song.
our next fun question as well, because I was about to start listening more, and I was like, oh, that's a separate question. AJ, where can people find us? We don't say that anymore. What am I doing? How do we end this podcast?
By saying goodbye, everyone.
I'm just going to let the lag build for a
Bye.
while. Let the lag build. Bye!
Thanks for joining us. You can find us and our incredible Discord community in the show notes, or reach out to us privately at funproblemspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend.